I've brought you today to St. Fagan's Museum, which is part of the National Museum of Wales network. It's a multi-acre site on the outskirts of the city, and on it you can find historic buildings of different sorts representing different moments in Welsh history. Now, where we're heading right now is the Celtic village, and there I will introduce you to a series of Celtic structures, round huts with thatched roofs, much as you would find in an Asterix comic. Now, there's much to say about these, and I'll explain to you the reason I've taken you there once we actually have them in front of us. In the meantime, it illustrates for anyone that comes here the sort of lifestyle that would have been led by Welsh people really up even into the 20th century. So I'm taking you to our first destination, which is the Celtic village here on the grounds of the museum. And while it may be obvious why we are visiting there, I'll say more about it in a few moments. In the meantime, I want you to walk with me, starting in the present and moving backwards in time. Modern Britain, probably much like many Western places, is full of brutalist architecture and all the sorts of social problems that you would expect there to be due to sort of post-World War II life. Having said that, there's also a memory here, and the memory can be found in place names and other such features of the land. You can hardly, I've said this before actually, but you can hardly ride your bicycle for more than a few kilometers before you find yourself passing by either a holy well or some other ancient site, evident either in the building itself or in the remains of some building that had once been there. So I love this place because it's so lush, it's so green. You can see some of this behind me as I walk, and it's an environment really that attests to what Wales is about. Now, I don't want to put too fine a point on it because clearly Wales, like any other Western country, has its issues, and it also has its, features in need of improvement. However, there is just such a wonder, such a beauty here, and the trees themselves attest to this. You might wonder then how and why the Welsh lost their faith. Statistically, it's said that Wales is the most atheist of countries in the United Kingdom, and this is not something that especially worries me. Not because I'm callous to the realities we face, but because I think evangelism here must surely consist more of reminder than of introduction. The well of memory here in Wales is deep, and it's something that we can use to our advantage as we communicate what the faith has always been about in this place. And really the fact that its history, the history of Christianity here, is in many ways the history of the people themselves. Now, why do I say that, and how can I say it so confidently? Because, as I've discovered of late, the history of Christianity goes back so far. It's not something that was introduced much later. It's not something that was introduced by violence. The history of Christianity in Wales not only precedes the Great Schism, but actually goes right back, even some might say, to the 1st century. So we're talking about a matter of decades after the death, resurrection, and ascension of our Lord. What truth is there in such a story? Well, we've talked in recent times about the significance of Glastonbury and about the visit of St. Joseph of Arimathea to England after the ascension of Jesus. But perhaps more concretely, there is also the story of St. Aristobulus. Now, St. Aristobulus was called the first bishop of Britain. He was said to have established a church in these lands, and to what degree that's factual, we don't know for sure, but I would say it doesn't matter. It's not, though, unrealistic, because the network between Britain and the continent, Britain and even the ancient Near East, has been proven and documented time and time again. I said in the last episode of this series that Julius Caesar was well aware of Britain when he led the Romans in the Gallic Wars, and in fact looked across the Channel with the intention of moving Rome to the shores of the Britons. Well, this may not have happened under Caesar, but within 50 years it did happen. And so by AD 47, Britain, or a large part of what is today England, was under Roman control. This is incredible. It's incredible because it means that the network was open for the transmission of Christianity. But, and this is where the story gets interesting, the Christianity that arrived on these shores is not necessarily the same Christianity as was borne by the Roman soldiery. People often talk about Celtic Christianity, and I know quite rightly that makes some scholars' skin crawl because it can be over-romanticized. The thing is, there was a Christianity here independent of Roman influence, and it was a Christianity that has been shown to us through archaeological evidence as well as documentary evidence, was influenced by Egyptian monasticism and other Greek influence. Some weeks ago now, I had the privilege of going with Father Andrew Stephen Damick down to Tintagel in Cornwall. And on the beaches around Tintagel, there have been discoveries of Byzantine artifacts. And these Byzantine artifacts, we presume, were used either in trade or were lost at the time of trade with the Celtic tribal peoples that inhabited that area in exchange for their tin. Tin was something that was mined and produced here in Britain, extending back even as far as the Phoenicians and the Greeks. So there was a network, and we can believe that someone like St. Aristobulus came from the Near East to the shores of Britain and established a church on the basis that Britain was not only known, it was a serious feature on the landscape of Mediterranean culture. The question is, what was the environment like to which these early Christians came? Well, we're looking at it. If you haven't seen what I'm showing you now, it means that you had a deprived childhood. Now, I say that lightly. All I mean is that you must not have had Asterix comics at your disposal. Asterix is, of course, a cartoon character that holds the Romans off as they continually try to take over his Gallic village. And the huts in the story are almost identical to the one that you see behind me. Now, this is also the kind of hut that would have been common for the Celtic tribal peoples across the land, really from probably 500 BC even until the 2nd century AD. This is important because it gives you a sense for the environment into which the first Christians came when they arrived in Britain, either by way of trade or by way of conquest. If you have images in your head about the sort of mystical, mysterious nature of Celtic society, they're there for good reason. I wouldn't eschew those at all. In other words, I am not one to dispel romantic notions of what Celtic society might have looked like. This is especially so in light of the room you see around me now. I'm standing in the middle of this Celtic roundhouse, and just below to my right is what would have been an oven. You can see the fire in the center of the room. Essentially, what we're standing in right now is a Celtic kitchen. And this is a room that would have served people over the course of about 600, if not more, years. It's also the sort of place in which a meal might have been prepared for St. Aristobulus, or later St. Fagan, after whom this museum is named. This would have been something akin to a Celtic living room. It was a room in which all of the action of the family took place. And you can see at its center the fire, as well as shields and other tools and weapons along the outside. But equally, it's filled with seating for many, many people. And so it has a communal aspect to it, one that would have been simply assumed as part of Celtic society. So I mentioned that this is St. Fagan's Museum, and it's most apropos that we should enjoy the sight of these Celtic huts. This is because St. Fagan is one of those figures that would have encountered this upon his arrival here in Britain in the mid to late 2nd century. The story goes like this. King Lucius was a British king, a king based somewhere here in Wales, and he had heard good stories of Christianity and what Christians were doing um, far east of his home. He wanted to know more about this, and so he wrote to Pope Eleutherius. Pope Eleutherius, in response, sent two missionaries. One of these missionaries was Saint Deruvian, and the other of these two missionaries was Saint Fagan. So in that respect, they are early apostles of Britain. Very little beyond that is known about them, although we do have churches in South Wales to this day named for St. Fagan at least. But the fact that this museum bears his name is yet one more example of how the memory has not entirely faded from the Welsh consciousness. And it is something that we are able to draw on as we seek to manifest Orthodox Christianity in this place today. Having said that, they're just two missionaries, and their interaction then with King Lucius and their conversion of him meant that the seeds had been planted for further work. Two successors to these missionaries would have been precisely the saints that we talked about in the episode that was filmed at Caerleon, Saints Julius and Aaron. Aaron in particular, the name suggests that he was not a Roman, but was rather a native Silurian, one of the tribal peoples of South Wales. And that he bore that name suggests that he had inherited a form of Christianity that was that drew deeply on the Old Testament and also deeply from the East. So we're building a picture. We're building a picture of a vibrant Christianity that is quite different to the Christianity that would later be brought to Britain by St. Augustine of Canterbury, for example, in the late 6th century. But It is Christianity that is distinctly Welsh and most distinctly Orthodox.